Okay, so today in class we spent a great deal of time looking at kind of some of um, the things we could look at to look at the economy and say, oh, geez, it's not doing too well. And so I kind of liken it to, if you go to the doctor, you're not feeling well, or just get a checkup. They're going to look at a couple things. They're going to look at your blood pressure. They might, do some other blood work. They might take your temperature, those types of things. Economists can do kind of the same thing when they look at an economy and look at the relative health of the economy. They're going to look at some things we talked about today, whether it be inflation, deflation, consumer spending, GDP, what's happening there, what's happening with prices, those types of things. And so, really, when we start looking specifically at the Great Depression and kind of what happened, there are going to be some signs that this prosperity that we talked about of the 1920s before spring break isn't going to last kind of forever. And so, section one of chapter 22 kind of focuses on the nation's sick economy and kind of what what's going on at the time. And so today, specifically, or in this video, we're going to look at the critical problems that were threatening the American economy in the late 1920s. We're going to look at the stock market crash of 1929 and kind of examine kind of the reasons for that and look at how it was kind of something that just accelerated the Great Depression. It's often mistakenly said that the stock market crash of 1929 caused the Great Depression. That's way too simple. It was much more complicated than that. And then we'll also start to look at how the Great Depression affected the economy in the U.S. and kind of throughout the world. So if we look at the end of the 1920s, going into the 1930s, there were some economic troubles on the horizon. Um, this prosperity that people thought would just kind of go on in perpetuity from World War I was kind of, again, as we mentioned, superficial. We had some important industries that were struggling, that were in some problems. Farmers grew more crops and raised more livestock than they could sell at a profit. Both consumers and farmers were steadily going into deeper into debt. And as the decade of the 20s drew to a close, these slippages in the economy are going to start to, again, signal the end of an era. We've got problems in specific industries such as railroads, textiles, and the steel industries, who had basically barely made a profit since the end of World War One, which is a problem. Mining and lumbering, which again had expanded during the wartime, were no longer in hard demand. Coal mining is especially hard hit. Um, we've got new forms of energy which are providing some competition, and so you have a decrease in the coal mining industry. Um, we've got even things that boomed in the 1920s, or the early 1920s, like the automobiles, constructions, and consumer goods. Those things declined as well, and it's just kind of overall a not a good thing. Um, Another thing that people can often look at when they look at kind of a economy's overall health, they look at something called housing starts. And so late 1920s housing starts began to fall in the United States, which means jobs in related industries. When housing starts, excuse me, I didn't really define what that is. That's just houses being built. And so when those go down, jobs in many of the related industries are going to go down as well. So we've got these things going on. We've also got problems in our farm sector. Um, During World War One, we looked at how prices rose as demand for American wheat and corn kind of went up. And so farmers planted more corn because they wanted to grow more corn, make more money. They're going to have to take out loans um, to to pay for the equipment. Um, and so there's going to be that going on. When the war ends, demand falls, so prices fall, which and they fall very sharply. So farmers not really understanding um, economics, um, they said, well, if prices go down, I'm just going to try to sell more. But that only causes prices to go down further. So we've got farmers who had gone into debt, who now basically can't make the money to pay back their loans. Um, so banks start to foreclose on those farms. And so Congress is going to try to help this initially with something that's called price supports for key products like wheat, corn, and cotton. Basically, what would happen under this program is the government would buy a surplus of the crops at a guaranteed price and then try to sell them in the world market. Um, this bill actually makes it to Calvin Coolidge's desk, the president, who vetoes it a couple times. Um, and basically just says farmers have never made money. I don't believe we can do much about it. Um, so they try to do some help, but nothing really happens there. And overall, by the late 1920s, consumers have less money to spend. By the late 1920s, Americans are buying less across the board, mainly because of rising prices, stagnant wages, and unbalanced distribution of income. But we also have an overbuying of credit in the preceding years. In the 1920s, where we had a lot of people buying stuff on credit. Um, so you have people again not buying as much. And then it came to the point where many Americans in the 1920s were living beyond their means. Like we said, they were buying on credit. Um, so you're borrowing money in hopes that you can pay for it in the future, basically. And this was something that businesses did, the government did. Uh, when you make credit readily available and don't really look at who can pay it back, and you're just giving money out, you're encouraging people to pile up large amounts of debt. And so we've got a lot of consumers piling up large amounts of debt. Problem is, when you don't really look at their ability to pay back, you've got lots of people that have borrowed lots of money that can't pay off their growing debts. And so this eventually is going to lead people to say, well, I can't spend as much. And so people begin to reduce their spending further. And so we've got that going on as well. We also have an uneven distribution of income. Now, if you're at all today interested in politics, this is something that comes up quite a bit. We look at the top 1% of wage earners versus the everyday worker, and it's not a new problem. People want to talk about it today, but it's also a problem during the 1920s. During the 1920s, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer, basically. And so more than 70% of the nation's families earn less than $2,500 per year, which was at that time considered to be the minimum amount needed for a decent standard of living. And so you have 70% of the nation's family earning what would be less than what would provide a decent standard of living. So that's not necessarily a good situation. Um, Even families that earn twice this amount, this $2,500 per year, could not afford many of the household products manufacturers were producing. So you've got a lot of Americans that aren't able to participate fully in the economic advances of the 1920s, and so it's not an economy that's working for everyone anyway. So when we look at the election of 1928, these things were going on, but it's an undercurrent. People don't understand that we're going to have this big um, economic problem here, or this crisis. People aren't there yet. And so in the election of 1928, we've got the Republican Herbert Hoover versus the Democrat Alfred Smith. Hoover wins easily because, again, to most Americans on the outside, things seem hunky-dory. We've got this prosperity that had been going on, for almost 10 years now in 1928. People didn't think it was going to end, and so it was kind of, why fix what isn't broken? This is the attitude most Americans went in, that the Republicans who had been in power before Hoover, we look at Coolidge, um, and why change basically? Why change from their policies? And so, you know, Hoover wins, like we said, in a landslide. Um, the 1920s also, whether it be under Coolidge before under Hoover, saw an increasing amount of Americans investing in the stock market. And again, increasing numbers of people could afford to invest their money in the stock market. And so you had people doing that. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is something that's still around today. You hear about it a lot. It's the most widely used barometer of a stock market's health. And the Dow is basically a measure based on the stock prices of 30 representative large firms trading on the New York Stock Exchange. So you look at 30 firms kind of across all the economy that makes up the Dow. Um, and so through the 1920s, stock prices were going up. And so that basically meant that if you invested your money in the stock market, let's say you bought a stock for $2 a share in 1920, in 1928, that same stock that you bought might be worth $20 a share. So you would have made $18 a share if you would have sold that, and that's a pretty good deal. But what also started to happen in the 1920s is something called speculation. And speculation is buying stocks and bonds on the chance of a quick return with little consideration for the risks involved. And so when you have speculation coupled with something else, buying on margin, and buying on margin is borrowing money or borrowing stocks to buy other stocks. Um, that's going to cause stock prices to go up because everybody's trying to buy stocks. The demand's high. And so oftentimes you had a company stock price that doesn't necessarily reflect the worth of the company. And so that's a problem, and that's really something that we're not going to get into. If you took an economic class, we talk about why that's a problem. Um, but you've got speculation, buying on margin, causing stock prices to go up. Well, here's the problem. If stock prices were then to go down very quickly, people who had bought that stock on margin are going to have no way to pay back their loan. And so we're going to have that one event that's going to happen. And it happened on October 29th of 1929. On October 24th of 1929, the stock market's going to take a pretty substantial plunge as panic investors are going to unload their shares. But 5 days later, on October 29th, is when we're going to have the event that's known as Black Tuesday, where the bottom's basically going to fall out of the stock market. The nation's going to lose its confidence in the stock market, and shareholders are going to frantically try to sell all their stocks as prices continue to go down. As many people rush to try to sell their stocks, that's only going to drive prices down even further. People who had bought stocks on credit were stuck with huge debts, while others are going to lose a lot of their savings that they may have invested in the stock market. By mid-November of 1929, investors had lost about $30 billion, which, again, if we think back to our study of World War I, that's about what the United States spent financing World War I. So it's not a great situation in 1929. And the stock market crash signals the beginning of the Great Depression, but it does not cause the Great Depression. It hastened the collapse of the economy. It made the depression more severe. But again, there are those other things that were happening that, worked in concert with the stock market crash that caused the Great Depression. So once the stock market crashes, that's going to kind of cause problems in other areas. One problem that it caused was in the banking sector. After the stock market crashed, a lot of people are going to get nervous about their money. and they're going to try to withdraw all their money from the banks. Um, However, as they showed up at these banks, a lot of people could not get their money back because banks had done the same thing individuals had done. They had invested money in the stock market, and so they had lost a lot of money. And so, as people begin to hear stories about how people tried to withdraw their money, they couldn't get it, that causes more of a panic, and it sends more people running to banks trying to withdraw their money. And what we have is a bank run. And now, if you've seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life, you can probably fast forward through the next 6 minutes because I'm going to show you the video of the bank run in the movie, and we'll kind of talk more about what that is here in a second. So if you look at It's a Wonderful Life, there's this famous scene where we have a bank run. So I'll hold on and let you watch this.
Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George. I've never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run.
Hey, lady, you got any money in the bank? You better hurry.
George, let's not stop. Let's go.
A minute there. Uh-oh.
Please, let's not stop,
I'll
George.
be back in a minute, Mary. Well, hello, everybody. Miss Thompson, how are you? Charlie, what's the matter here? Can't you get in? What is this, Uncle Billy? A holiday?
George.
Come on in, everybody. That's right. Let's come on in. Come on, Jimmy. Now, look, why don't you all sit down? Here, there are a lot of seats over there. Make yourself at home.
George, can I see you a minute?
Why did you call me?
I just did, but they said you left. This is a pickle, George. This is a pickle.
All right, now, what happened? How did it start?
Well, how does a thing like this ever start? All I know is the bank called our loan.
When?
About an hour ago, I handed over all our cash.
All of it?
Every cent of it, and still was less than we owed them.
Holy mackerel.
And then I got scared, George, and closed the doors.
The whole town's going crazy.
Yeah, hello? George, it's Potter.
Hello?
George, there is a rumor around town that you've closed your doors. Is that true? Oh, well, I'm very glad to hear that. George, are you all right? Do you need any police?
Police? What for?
Well, mobs get pretty ugly sometimes, you know. George, I am going all out to help in this crisis. I have just guaranteed the bank sufficient funds to meet their needs. They will close up for a week and then reopen.
Just took over the bank.
I may lose a fortune, but I am willing to guarantee your people too. Just tell them to bring their shares over here, and I will pay 50 cents on the dollar.
Oh, you never miss a trick, do you, Potter? Well, you're gonna miss this one.
If you close your doors before 6 p.m., you will never reopen.
Now, just remember that this thing isn't as black as it appeared. I have some news for you, folks. I was just talking to old man Potter, and he's guaranteed cash payments to the bank. The bank's going to reopen next week.
But, George, I got my money here.
Did he guarantee this place?
Well, no, Charlie, I didn't even ask him. We don't need Potter over here.
And I'll take mine now.
No, but you're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
I got $242 in here, and $242 isn't going to break anybody.
Okay, Tom. All right. Here you are. You sign this, you get your money in 60 days.
For 60 days?
Well, now, that's what you agreed to when you bought your shares.
Tom, did you get your money?
No.
Well, I did. Old man Potter will pay 50 cents on the dollar for every share you got.
50
Yes, cash.
Well, what do you say?
No, Tom, you have to stick to your original agreement. Now, give us 60 days on this thing.
Okay, Randall.
Are you going to Potter's?
Better to get half than nothing.
Randall, wait. Now listen to me. I beg of you not to do this thing. If Potter gets a hold of this building and loan, there'll never be another decent house built in this town. He's already got charge of the bank, he's got the bus line, he got the department stores, and now he's after us. Why? Well, it's very simple. Because we're cutting in on his business, that's why. And because he wants to keep you living in his slums and paying the kind of rent he decides. Joe, you had one of those Potter houses, didn't you? Well, have you forgotten? Have you forgotten what he charged you for that broken-down shack? Here, Ed, you remember last year when things weren't going so well and you couldn't make your payments? Well, you didn't lose your house, did you? You think Potter would have let you keep it? Can't you understand what's happening here? Don't you see what's happening? Potter isn't selling, Potter's buying. And why? Because we're panicky and he's not, that's why. He's picking up some bargain. Now, we can get through this thing all right. We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
But my husband hasn't worked in over a year, and I need money.
How am I going to live until the bank opens?
I got doctor bills to pay. I need cash.
I can't keep my kids on faith. I've got to have...
How much do you need?
Hey! I got $2,000. Here's $2,000. This will tide us over to the bank reopens. All right, Tom, how much do you need?
$242.
No, Tom, just enough to tide you over until the bank reopens.
I'll take $242.
There you are.
That'll close my account.
Your account's still here. That's a loan. Okay. All right, Ed.
Well, I got $300 here, George.
All right, now, Ed, what'll it take until the bank opens? What do you need?
Well, I suppose $20.
$20. Now you're talking. Thanks, Ed. That's fine. All right, now, Miss Thompson, how much do you want?
But it's your own money,
Now,
George.
never mind about that. How much do you want now?
I can get along with 20, all right.
$20. Fine.
And I'll sign the
Yeah,
papers.
you don't have to sign anything. I know you. You pay when you can. That's okay. All right, Miss Davis.
Could I have $17.50?
Sure, Hart. Of course you can have it. You got 50 cents. There. 7.
We're going to make it, George.
6.
I'll never close this up today.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bingo! We made it, Commodore Eustace. We made it. Look.
All right, so if you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, I don't really want to set up the whole movie for you, but basically, that's a savings and loan who had loan money to houses, or I mean to people to build houses, that kind of stuff. It's similar to a bank, and you could see that they didn't have all the deposits on hand, and so when everybody showed up, they didn't have the money to give it back, and so oops, I'm on the wrong slide there. And so you had this situation where he had a run on that savings and loan. Now he's able to kind of talk people out of it, and it's a movie, It's a Wonderful Life, yada, yada, yada. But lots of banks closed during this period after the stock market kind of collapses. In 1929, 600 banks closed alone. By 1933, 11,000 of the nation's 25,000 banks had failed. And like I said, one of the biggest lessons that we learned from the Great Depression is we need to have some insurance on our money in the bank to eliminate bank runs in the future. And so one of the solutions that ends up coming out of this, which we'll talk about later, is the FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that insures people's loans. And so today, we don't have those bank runs. So we've kind of avoided that. But beyond banks, the Great Depression is going to hit other businesses. GDP, or gross domestic product, falls by nearly 1/2. Railroad and automobile companies were hit particularly hard as they failed. As the economy kind of plunged further, we've got more businesses closing. We've got more workers losing their jobs. The unemployment rate's going to leap from 3% in 1929 to 25% in 1933. So in 4 years, you go from having 3% unemployment to 25% unemployment, which, 1 out of every 4 workers is now going to be out of a job. Those who ended up keeping their jobs faced pay cuts, reduced hours. So it's not a good thing. And it's not limited to the United States. Um, Whereas the United States kind of had this prosperity going on during the 1920s, much of Europe had suffered throughout the 1920s, again, trying to rebuild from World War I, which did make it difficult for the United States to sell American-made goods and farm products to Europe. And so that was a problem. And we knew it was a problem in the 1920s. However, in 1930, Congress is going to make matters worse when they passed the Hawley-Smoot tariff, which was designed to be a protective tariff because as you have things going on in the United States that aren't great, businesses are struggling, they wanted to make sure they didn't have European goods flowing into the country and cheap European goods flowing into the country. So it's designed to be this protective tariff. But it kind of has the opposite effect. Many countries are going to pass similar tariffs, and so within a few years, you're going to have worldwide trade falling by 40%, which is not good when countries aren't trading with one another. And so, to kind of sum it up, when we look at the causes of the Great Depression, historians are going to disagree to a large extent on what caused the Great Depression. However, most are going to agree on a combination of a few of these things as causes. One is high tariffs and war debts that cut down on foreign trade. And so when you cut down on foreign trade, people are producing less, which means people aren't employed, which means people don't have money, which means people aren't buying things, which means we produce even less. And so there's certainly that problem. Others will point to issues in the farm sector within the United States. And we mentioned how, once World War I ended, there wasn't a need for farm products. And so we looked at that and said, okay, that might be a problem. We also mentioned how there was a unequal distribution of wealth and how that kind of, we didn't really examine that closely, but most economists will look and say that might be a reason for the Great Depression. Others will look at the availability of easy credit, which fits under monetary policy, how the United States government kind of set up a system where it encouraged businesses to offer easy credit, and we spent a great deal of time looking at that, which is closely related to the stock market crash and the financial panic that ensued as being certainly one of the causes of the Great Depression. We also had overproduction in industry, producing too much. Same thing in agriculture. When you produce too much, prices go down, and that ultimately can lead kind of into a downward spiraling kind of cycle. We also, and we didn't talk about this as much, but when Herbert Hoover is elected in 1928, he continues a lot of those easy money policies of Coolidge, and again, that kind of sets the stage. And then tomorrow in class, we'll really start looking at kind of how Hoover failed to effectively deal with the Great Depression.